Ali had spent years learning to navigate the chaos of airports. For him, terminals were nothing more than checkpoints, sterile glass walls, long queues, the aroma of coffee, and hurried announcements over intercoms. They were places where businessmen, like him, paused briefly, only to move on to the next deal, the next country, the next negotiation. His life was defined by forward motion. But that day, something strange happened. As he walked through the airport, dragging his leather carry-on, behind him, Ali felt the rhythm of his stride falter. His eyes caught sight of something, or rather, someone, that froze him in his tracks. Near the large glass windows overlooking the snowy runway sat a young woman wrapped in a gray coat, her head leaning gently against the cold metal panel. Tiny babies, both wearing identical gray hats, slept soundly in her arms. Their small chests rose and fell with soft, synchronized breaths, their faces peaceful against the bustle of the terminal. And the woman, her face was unmistakable, Mavish Ali. Blinked once, twice. His mind refused to believe what his eyes were telling him. Memories rushed forward, colliding with the present. It had been nearly 4 years since he last saw her. Back then, she wasn't sitting by airport windows with children in her arms. Back then, she was in his house, quietly folding laundry, cooking meals, humming to herself while dusting the chandeliers. She had been his maid, and more than that, she had been someone who, despite her simplicity, had left a mark on his life. Ali stood frozen, his pulse hammering in his ears. The businessmen and travelers around him moved briskly, pulling trolleys, clutching passports, and rushing toward departure gates. But to him, the world seemed to have slowed to a crawl. God, he muttered under his breath. I thought, I'd lost you. It wasn't just the shock of seeing her again. It was the twins, 2 little babies nestled against her chest, wrapped in a patterned blanket. Their delicate features mirrored each other, like 2 small reflections of one soul. Ali's. Thoughts spun out of control. Whose children were they? Where had she been all these years? And why was she here, alone, in an airport, with exhaustion written all over her face? He took a step closer, his polished shoes echoing against the tiled floor. He remembered her laughter, soft, shy, yet filled with warmth. He remembered the day she suddenly disappeared, leaving his mansion in silence. No explanation, no goodbye, just gone. For months, he had thought of asking around, searching for her. But pride had silenced him. He was Ali Khan, one of the most successful young businessmen in the city, owner of multiple companies and investments spread across continents. He wasn't supposed to lose sleep over a maid. At least, that's what he told himself. But here she was. The universe had crossed their paths again, and this time, it wasn't in the quiet corridors of his mansion. It was in the heart of an airport filled with strangers. Ali's heart ached as he studied her from a distance. Mevish's face, though, still beautiful, carried the weight of fatigue. Her hair, once neatly tied back in braids as she worked around his house, now spilled loosely from beneath a woolen scarf. Her lips were slightly chapped, her hands trembling faintly as she clutched her babies tighter against her chest. She looked fragile, yet fiercely protective. And then it hit him. The twins. Their small, innocent faces were too familiar. One of them stirred slightly, and Ali's heart nearly stopped. Their eyes. Those eyes resembled his own. A cold wave of realization rippled through him. Could it be? Was it even possible? He shook his head, forcing the thought away. No, he whispered under his breath. It couldn't be. But doubt clung to him like a shadow. Ali wanted to walk straight up to her, to demand answers, to ask why she vanished without a word, and to know whose children these were. But his feet refused to move. He stood there, torn between the pride of a millionaire who didn't want to expose his vulnerability and the human inside him who longed for the truth. The announcement system crackled overhead, calling out a boarding group for a flight to London. The noise jolted him back into the present. He saw Mevish stir slightly, as though the announcement reminded her of something.
She adjusted the babies carefully, kissed their foreheads, and closed her tired eyes again. Ali's chest tightened. What was she doing here? Was she waiting for someone? Or was she planning to board a flight alone, with 2 infants in her arms?
And no one to help her. Memories flashed before his eyes. He remembered the nights when he returned home late and saw her quietly feeding stray cats in the backyard, her eyes filled with compassion. He remembered once finding her crying silently in the kitchen, though she never told him why. And he remembered how her presence, gentle, almost invisible, had somehow made his cold, empty mansion feel like a home. And then one day, without warning, she was gone. Ali clenched his fists. He had always assumed she left for a better job or returned to her village. But seeing her now, with 2 babies that bore a resemblance he couldn't ignore, made his chest heavy with questions he never dared to imagine. His pride whispered, "Turn around. Forget this. Walk away." But his heart thundered, "No. This is your chance. Find out the truth." Ali took another step forward, his breath uneven. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about board meetings, profits, or investment portfolios. He wasn't thinking about his status as one of the city's most admired young millionaires. He was thinking about Mevish, the maid who had once vanished from his life, and the possibility that the truth she carried now could change everything. And with that thought, Ali finally began walking toward her. Ali's steps grew heavier with every stride. The polished tiles beneath his feet seemed to stretch endlessly, as though the distance between him and Mevish was deliberately refusing to shrink. His heart hammered in his chest, loud enough that he wondered if passers-by could hear it. When he was finally close enough to see her properly, he noticed the faint lines beneath her eyes, signs of sleepless nights, of burdens carried too heavily for too long. The babies in her arms stirred slightly, one letting out a soft whimper before nestling back against her chest. For a moment, Ali just stood there. He couldn't find the words. What was he supposed to say to a woman who had once worked in his mansion, vanished without explanation, and now sat before him with children that might, just might, be his? He cleared his throat. "Mevish!" Her eyelids fluttered open at the sound of her name. For a second, confusion clouded her face. Then her eyes widened, and she sat up straighter, clutching her twins tighter as though shielding them from a storm. "Ali?" Her voice cracked, a mixture of disbelief and fear. "It's me." He managed a small, hesitant smile. "After all these years?" Mevish's lips trembled. She looked around quickly, as if to make sure she wasn't dreaming or hallucinating. The airport buzzed with its usual life. Boarding announcements, hurried travelers, children tugging at their parents' sleeves. But for her, everything blurred into silence except for the man standing before her. "What are you doing here?" she whispered, her tone defensive, wary. "I could ask you the same thing." Ali's voice was calm, but inside, his heart was burning with questions. "You disappeared, Mevish, without a word. I searched for answers, but you were just gone." Her fingers tightened around the babies. She lowered her gaze, refusing to meet his eyes. "I had my reasons." Ali crouched down to her level, his expensive coat brushing against the cold floor tiles. He wasn't Ali Khan the millionaire. In that moment, he was simply a man searching for truth. "And these reasons," he said softly, nodding toward the infants, "do they have something to do with them?" Mevish stiffened. For a long, tense silence, she said nothing. The only sounds were the steady hum of the airport and the tiny breaths of her sleeping twins. Finally, she looked up, and her eyes met his. They were filled with something he couldn't quite decipher: fear, pain, maybe even guilt. "They're my children, Ali." Her words cut him like glass. Not because she admitted the obvious, but because she hadn't said more. Whose children? How old were they? And why did something deep in his chest scream that he already knew the answers? Ali swallowed hard. Are they? He stopped himself, unsure if he had the right to ask. Mevish shook her head quickly, almost too quickly. Don't. His jaw clenched. Don't what? Don't ask the question that's been burning me alive since I saw you sitting here. Don't demand to know why you vanished, leaving me with 1,000 questions. Don't wonder why these children, his voice cracked, look so much like me. Her eyes shimmered with tears. She turned her face away, biting her lip to keep her composure. Ali's chest ached. He hadn't expected this reunion to be easy, but the wall she was putting between them felt like a punishment he didn't deserve. Mevish, he said softly, his voice breaking the tension. I thought I'd lost you forever. And maybe I deserve that. Maybe I was blind back then, too proud to admit how much your presence meant to me. But seeing you here, with them, it feels like fate is giving me another chance. Her shoulders trembled. She closed her eyes, 2 silent tears slipping down her cheeks. You don't understand, Ali. It's not that simple. Then make me understand. His tone grew firmer. Because I swear to God, if you walk away again, I won't survive it this time. The twins stirred again, one letting out a faint cry. Mevish rocked them gently, whispering soothing words under her breath until they calmed. Ali watched her, a pang of longing slicing through him. She looked so natural, so complete, as a mother. But the question still clawed at his heart. Was she their mother alone, or had he been robbed of the chance to be their father too? Mevish finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I left because I had no choice. If I had stayed, everything would have fallen apart. For you, for me, for them. Ali frowned. What do you mean? She looked at him then, really, looked, as though deciding whether he could handle the truth. Your world, it was never meant for someone like me. You were a rising millionaire, Ali. I was just your maid. People talked, people judged, and when I realized... She trailed off, clutching the babies tighter. When you realized what? He pressed, his voice urgent. Mevish shook her head, her lips sealed. Not here. Not now. Ali's frustration threatened to spill over, but he forced himself to breathe. This wasn't the place for an argument. The airport was filled with eyes, ears, and distractions. She was exhausted, clearly guarding her children like a lioness. He softened his tone. Fine. Not here. But don't shut me out again. Please. If not for me, then for them. They deserve the truth. Her gaze flickered to the twins, then back to him. Something in his words seemed to pierce the wall she had built around herself. For the first time, her eyes held not just fear, but also the faint glimmer of hope. Ali extended his hand slowly, hesitantly. Let me help you, Mevish. Whatever the reason you left, whatever secrets you're hiding, I don't care right now. Just don't carry it alone anymore. She looked at his hand, torn between trust and fear. Her heart raced. She had spent years keeping the truth buried, protecting her children from a world too cruel for their innocence. But seeing Ali again, his eyes, his voice, his plea, shook the foundation of the life she had built. Her lips parted, as though she might finally speak the words he longed to hear. But just then, the airport intercom blared another announcement, calling for final boarding to Istanbul. Mevish flinched, her eyes darting toward the gate. Panic flashed across her face. Ali noticed it immediately. Wait, are you leaving? Right now? She stood abruptly, adjusting the babies in her arms. Ali, please. Not here. He rose with her, his heart pounding. Mevish, you can't just walk away again. Not now. Not after this. her eyes filled with tears as she whispered, "I have to." And before Ali could stop her, she began, walking swiftly toward the gate, her twins clutched tightly to her chest, leaving him standing in the middle of the airport, his heart breaking all over again. Ali's chest tightened as he watched Mevish disappear into the crowd. The bustling terminal swallowed her figure quickly, her gray scarf fluttering behind her as she hurried toward the boarding gates with the twins pressed close. For a brief moment, Ali stood frozen, torn between his pride and his heart. He could let her go. Again. Walk away, as he did 4 years ago, convincing himself that some answers were better left unknown. But his heart roared louder than his pride this time. Not again. Not when fate had finally brought her back within his reach. Ali clenched his fists and started after her, his polished shoes striking the tiles with determined precision. People moved in every direction, families dragging suitcases, tourists carrying cameras, businessmen rushing to catch flights. But Ali's eyes saw only one figure, Mevish, clutching her children like a shield, moving faster than he'd ever seen her move before. Mevish. His voice cut through the noise. She didn't turn back. The twins whimpered at the sound of his call, sensing their mother's tension. Mevish tightened her grip and quickened her pace. She wasn't just avoiding a man. She was fleeing from a past she had buried with trembling hands. Ali's long strides gained on her quickly. "Stop running!" Finally, she paused for the briefest second, turning her head slightly. Their eyes met across the crowd. Hers glistened with tears, with fear, with something that pierced Ali's soul. But in the next instant, she turned away, again, and vanished into the security line. Ali's heart pounded as he reached the line, but an airport guard stepped forward. "Sir, boarding pass?" Ali faltered. He didn't have one. I'm not boarding. I just need to talk to that woman," he explained, gesturing toward Mavish's fading figure. The guard frowned, shaking his head. "Only passengers beyond." "This point. Step aside." Ali's jaw tightened. He was a millionaire, used to getting past closed doors, but this barrier wasn't one he could buy his way through. His mind raced. If Mehvish boarded that plane, she would vanish again, this time, possibly forever. And with her would go the truth about the twins, about the past, about everything he hadn't dared to admit to himself. Ali's chest burned with urgency. He pulled out his phone and dialed his assistant, Faisal, who was never more than a call away. "Sir?" Faisal's crisp voice answered immediately. "Book me on the next flight to Istanbul, now, whatever it costs." "I don't care." There was a brief pause. "Istanbul? Sir, your meeting in Zurich. Cancel it," Ali snapped, his voice low and intense. "This is more important." Faisal, though surprised, didn't argue further. "Understood, sir. I'll call you back within minutes." Ali ended the call, his eyes fixed on the gate where Mevish had disappeared. He wasn't going to lose her again. Not this time. Memories that wouldn't let go as he waited near the boarding area, flashes of the past flooded him like an unstoppable tide. He remembered the nights when he returned home from late meetings and found Mevish still awake, quietly folding laundry with weary hands. He had asked her once why she didn't sleep earlier, and she had smiled softly, saying, "Peace comes when everything around you rests, sir." He remembered catching her humming lullabies to herself when she thought no one was listening. He had teased her gently once, and she had flushed red, stammering in embarrassment. And most of all, he remembered the night he had almost confessed something he had never admitted even to himself. A storm had knocked out the power in his mansion, and as thunder shook the sky, he found her lighting candles in the hallways. For a moment, in the golden glow of candlelight, she looked like something out of a dream. His heart had stirred, but pride and fear of scandal silenced him. Then, she was gone. And now, after all those years, she stood before him again, no longer the shy maid of his mansion, but a mother, strong, protective, and mysterious. Ali's throat tightened. He needed answers, not just for himself, but for the tiny faces of those twins whose resemblance to him gnawed at his soul. An unlikely ally. As he stood there, Faisal called back. "Sir, you're confirmed on the next flight to Istanbul. 2 hours. From now." "Good," Ali replied sharply. "Meet me at the gate with my documents. I'm not losing her." "Yes, sir, but—" Faisal hesitated. "Do you mind if I ask? Who is she?" Ali's silence stretched long. Finally, he said in a low voice, "She's someone I should never have let go." And he hung up. At the gate, Ali lingered near the glass panels overlooking the runway, watching as Mevish's plane prepared for departure. His chest tightened with every passing moment. The twins would grow restless on the flight, he thought. She would struggle with both of them in her arms. The thought made his heart ache. He clenched his jaw. He had always solved problems with money, with power, with influence. But this wasn't about business or reputation. This was about something raw, something deeply human, love, regret, and the desperate need for truth. As the plane began taxiing down the runway, Ali whispered to himself, "If those children are mine, I will never forgive myself for not being there." The unseen struggle. Meanwhile, inside the plane, Mevish rocked her twins gently, her heart pounding harder than the engines outside. She pressed her lips to their foreheads, inhaling their innocence, as if drawing courage from them. Tears burned her eyes. She hadn't expected to see Ali ever again. His sudden appearance felt like destiny, mocking her carefully built walls. For 4 years, she had carried the weight of silence, choosing to vanish from his world rather than risk destroying his life. But fate was merciless. Fate had placed her right in front of him, with the very truth she had sworn to protect. Her mind echoed with Ali's words. They deserve the truth. She closed her eyes. Yes, they did. But at what cost? Ali's resolve. Back in the terminal, Ali watched the plane disappear into the gray sky. For the first time in years, he felt powerless, like the boy he once was before success had cloaked him in pride. But alongside that helplessness burned determination. "Run if you want, Mevish," he muttered under his breath. "But I will. Find you. And when I do, I'll uncover the truth you've been hiding, even if it changes everything I thought I knew." And in that moment, Ali Khan, the millionaire who had conquered boardrooms and markets, made a silent vow. This time, he wouldn't let love or truth slip through his fingers. And in that moment, Ali Khan, the millionaire who had conquered boardrooms and markets, made a silent vow. This time, he wouldn't let love or truth slip through his fingers. 2 days later, the crisp Istanbul air brushed against his face as Ali stepped out of the airport terminal. The city stretched wide before him, minarets piercing the sky, the Bosphorus glittering in the distance, and streets alive with the rhythm of history and modern chaos intertwined. He should have felt awe, but his mind was locked on one thought. Mevish is here. Faisal, his loyal assistant, trailed behind him, dragging the luggage. "Sir, we've secured a suite at the Four Seasons. Shall I take you there first?" Ali shook his head firmly. "No. First, we find her." Faisal hesitated. "Sir, Istanbul is massive. Without an address, without a clue, finding someone is like chasing a shadow." Ali's jaw tightened. "She isn't a shadow. She's here, with 2 children. A woman. Traveling alone with twins isn't invisible, Faisal. We'll find her." There was steel in his voice that silenced further protest. Faisal only nodded. The search begins over the next 24 hours. Ali put all his resources into motion. He reached out to contacts, leveraged his wealth discreetly, and even spoke with airline staff to confirm her arrival. Yes, Mevish and the twins had boarded that flight. Yes, they had disembarked. After that, silence. It was as though she had melted into the veins of Istanbul itself. Frustration gnawed at him. He had always been a man of solutions, a strategist who bent circumstances to his will. But this was personal, and personal battles were always the hardest. At midnight, Ali stood on the balcony of his hotel, overlooking the shimmering Bosphorus bridge. His mind wouldn't rest. He replayed every word she'd spoken back at the airport. "I had no choice. Your world was never meant for someone like me." What did she mean? Why had she chosen to carry such a heavy silence? And the biggest question of all, were the twins truly his? He gripped the balcony rail, whispering to himself, "I won't stop until I know." An unexpected lead. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. The next morning, Faisal rushed into Ali's suite with a file in hand. "Sir, I think we have something." Ali straightened. "Go on." "I checked with immigration and local transport. Services. A woman matching Mevish's description, traveling with 2 infants, took a taxi from the airport. The driver dropped her in Fatih district, near an old residential area." Ali's eyes lit with determination. Fatih. He knew of the district, historic, crowded, filled with narrow alleys and old stone buildings. It was the kind of place where someone could easily disappear among ordinary lives. "Take me there," he ordered. The streets of Fatih the car wound, through Istanbul's labyrinth of streets until finally reaching the heart of Fatih. The scent of fresh bread and roasted chestnuts filled the air, mingling with the distant call to prayer. Children played football in alleys, women carried baskets of groceries, and shopkeepers bargained animatedly with customers. Amid the noise and life, Ali felt strangely out of place. His tailored suit and polished shoes drew curious glances. But he didn't care. Somewhere here, Mevish was building a life. He and Faisal asked discreet questions at bakeries, shops, even among children who played nearby. Most shook their heads. But one old woman sitting outside her door with prayer beads in hand nodded knowingly when Ali described Mevish. "Yes," she said in broken English. "A woman, 2 babies. She lives there." The woman pointed toward a narrow lane tucked between stone houses. Ali's pulse quickened. "Thank you." At her door, the lane was quiet, lined with modest apartments whose paint had long faded. Laundry hung from balconies, fluttering in the wind. And there, at the end of the row, Ali saw a door slightly ajar. Through it, he caught a faint sound, the soft, melodic hum of a lullaby. He froze. He knew that voice. It was Mevish. Ali took a deep breath, his heart pounding in his chest. Slowly, he walked toward the door, each step heavy with years of unanswered questions. When he finally stood before it, he hesitated. Should he knock? Should he call her name? Should he simply walk in? Before he could decide, the door creaked wider, and there she was. Mevish stood in the doorway, her scarf loosely draped around her shoulders, her face pale from exhaustion, but still luminous. In her arms, one twin stirred, while the other played with the edge of her scarf. Her eyes widened. In shock. "Ali?" Ali's breath caught. All the words he had prepared vanished. He could only whisper, "You really thought I wouldn't find you?" Her lips parted, but no sound came. The twins shifted, one letting out a small cry. Ali stepped forward, his voice low but firm. "Mevish, we need to talk. No more running, no more silence." She looked torn, her eyes darting between him and the twins. Fear, longing, and something deeper flickered across her face. I didn't think you'd follow me," she admitted, her voice trembling. Ali's gaze softened. "I promised myself I wouldn't let you slip away again. Not until I know the truth." For a long moment, silence hung between them. The bustling street outside faded, leaving only the sound of 2 hearts beating with years of unfinished history. Finally, Mevish stepped aside, her hand trembling as she gestured toward the inside of the small apartment. "Come in, Ali," she whispered. "It's time you know everything." Ali crossed the threshold, his heart racing. The air inside was warm, filled with the faint scent of baby powder and freshly baked bread. The twins lay in a small crib, their innocence wrapping. The room in a fragile piece. Ali's eyes moved from them to her. "Start from the beginning, Mevish. No more secrets. Tell me why you left. Tell me about them. Tell me the truth that's been tearing us apart." Mevish closed the door softly, her back against it. She took a deep breath, her eyes glistening with tears. And then, in a voice heavy with years of silence, she said, "Ali, these children are yours." Ali Khan thought he had known the storms of life. He had weathered boardroom betrayals, market crashes, and ruthless competitors trying to tear him down. Yet none of those tempests compared to the storm that raged inside his heart now. He had made a vow at that airport. Never again would he let truth or love slip from his grasp. But a vow was not enough. The world, with all its prejudice and judgment, had ways of testing a man's courage. The gossip that spread. Within a week of his return from London, whispers began to spread through the city's elite circles. Pictures had surfaced online. Ali Khan, the elusive millionaire, photographed at the airport with a young woman carrying twins. Some captions were cruel, others mocking. From mansion to maid, the untold story. Who was the mysterious woman with Ali Khan? Millionaire's hidden family? The media feasted on speculation. Paparazzi trailed his car, flashing cameras at every turn. Some of his business rivals smirked, waiting for a scandal to erode his empire. And through it all, Mevish stayed silent. She didn't defend herself, didn't feed the gossip, didn't argue with the lies. Instead, she poured her energy into caring for the twins, who were slowly warming to Ali's presence. Ali admired her strength, but he also knew the silence was breaking her inside. The family confrontation. One evening, Ali returned to his mansion, to find his elder sister, Shagufta, waiting for him in the grand living room. She stood tall, her voice sharp with disapproval. "Ali, what nonsense is this I'm hearing? That maid, Mevish, how dare you bring her into your life again? With children, no less?" Ali's jaw tightened. "She is not just a maid. She is a disgrace," Shagufta interrupted. "Do you know what people are saying? That you've lost your mind, that you're letting a woman with an uncertain past ruin the Khan name." Ali's eyes burned. "Her past is more honorable than half the people who sit at your charity galas and whisper lies behind crystal glasses." Shagufta's face hardened. "If you choose her, Ali, don't expect this family to stand by you. You'll destroy everything father built." Ali's response was calm, but it cut like steel. "What father built means nothing if I betray my own heart. I will not lose her again." Mavish's breaking point. Later that night, Mevish overheard fragments of Ali's confrontation. She sat alone in the nursery, watching her children sleep. Tears glistened in her eyes. "Ya Allah," she whispered. "I never asked for this. I only wanted a safe life for them. If my presence ruins him, if the world despises me, should I walk away again?" Her thoughts spun in circles. She remembered the years of struggle, working double shifts, feeding her babies with whatever little she could earn, facing pity and judgment as a single mother. She had survived all of that. But now, faced with the possibility of bringing shame to the man she loved, she questioned whether her love was selfish. Ali found her in the nursery, her hands trembling as she tucked in the children. He knelt beside her, his voice soft but unwavering. "Mevish, don't you dare think of leaving again. Not because of them. Not because of fear." Her tears fell freely now. "Ali, I don't want to be the reason you lose everything. Your family, your reputation. Ali took her hand, pressing it firmly against his chest. What use is reputation if it costs me the only truth I've ever wanted? Let them talk. Let them laugh. I will not trade your love for their approval. The invitation. Just when Ali thought the storm couldn't grow fiercer, an invitation arrived. A Diao charity gala hosted by the very circles now whispering about him. It was an unspoken challenge. If Ali appeared with Mevish, he would be publicly declaring his choice, facing ridicule head-on. If he went alone, it would be seen as shame and surrender. Ali didn't hesitate. He extended his hand to Mevish. Come with me. She froze. Ali, you don't understand. I do, he interrupted gently. I know it will be hard. I know they will stare, whisper, judge. But let them. Because when you walk in beside me, they'll see what true strength looks like. Not just mine, but yours. For the first time, Mevish didn't answer with words. She simply looked at him, into his eyes, into the depth of his vow, and nodded. The twins' innocence, on the day of the gala, as Mevish dressed nervously, the twins tugged at her dupatta and laughed. They didn't know of scandal, of judgment, of the weight of history pressing on their mother's shoulders. All they knew was love, comfort, and the security they felt when Ali lifted them in his arms. Ali kissed their foreheads before leaving. Someday, he whispered, you'll understand how brave your mother is. The stage was set, the world was watching, and in the hearts of Ali and Mevish, one question burned. Would love be enough to silence the storm, or would the storm swallow them whole? The night of the gala glittered with chandeliers, champagne flutes, and polished marble floors. The city's elite gathered in their finest attire, ready to parade wealth, gossip, and influence. It was the kind of evening Ali Khan had mastered years ago. Yet tonight felt different, because tonight, for the first time in his life, Ali wasn't here to impress. He was here to stand beside the woman he loved. The entrances. Ali's sleek black car pulled up to the red carpet. The usual frenzy of cameras began. But when the back door opened and Mevish stepped out, gasps rippled through the crowd. She wore a simple but elegant navy dress, her dupatta draped gracefully over her shoulder. There were no diamonds, no designer labels, just dignity. And yet she carried herself with a quiet strength that outshone every jewel in the room. Ali took her hand openly, guiding her up the carpet, ignoring the flashing lights and murmurs. Every click of a camera felt like a bullet, but he held his head high. Some reporters shouted, Ali Khan, is she the mother of your children? Who is she to you? Ali stopped, turned, and looked directly into the sea of microphones. His voice rang steady, every word clear. She is the woman I should have never let go. She is the mother of 2 beautiful children I will raise as my own. And she is the only truth in a world full of lies. The crowd went silent. For the first time, Ali Khan hadn't spoken as a businessman, but as a man. Inside the fire, inside the ballroom, conversations buzzed like angry bees. Some women whispered behind jeweled fans, others sneered. A few men chuckled into their glasses. Shagufta, Ali's sister, stood at the far end, her expression stiff with fury. She approached him, her voice low but cutting. Ali, this is madness. You've humiliated us all. Ali's reply was calm, almost gentle. No, Appa. What humiliated us was choosing pride over humanity for so many years. Tonight, I choose differently. Mevish lowered her eyes, bracing for the storm. But just then, a voice spoke up. An unexpected ally. It was Mr. Rahman, one of the city's oldest industrialists. Known for his sternness, he surprised everyone as he walked toward Mevish. Child, he said softly, I remember you. Years ago you served tea in this very hall, and tonight you walk here with more grace than all of us combined. He turned to the crowd. If Ali Khan, a man who has built empires, chooses her, then perhaps it is we who should rethink what truly matters. The murmurs shifted. Some eyes softened. Others avoided meeting Ali's gaze. Slowly, the tide began to turn. The children's arrival, and then, as if fate had orchestrated it, a pair of tiny voices echoed through the hall. The twins, restless without their mother, had been brought in by the nanny. "Ami!" one of them cried, running toward Mevish. The other followed, tugging at Ali's trousers, looking up at him with innocent eyes. The crowd melted. The harshest critics could not argue against the purity of children. Cameras flashed again, but this time the pictures told a different story. Not scandal, but family. Ali lifted one child in his arms while Mevish carried the other. Together they stood before the glittering hall, not as scandal, not as disgrace, but as truth. The resolution later that night, as the gala wound down, Ali and Mevish stepped out onto the balcony. The city lights stretched before them, but Ali's focus was only on her. "You were brave tonight," he whispered. Mevish shook her head, tears shimmering in her eyes. "No, Ali, I was terrified." He cupped her face gently. "Bravery isn't the absence of fear. It's walking through it, and you walk through it with me." She smiled faintly, her heart swelling. "Do you really think we can survive their world?" Ali kissed her forehead. "We won't survive their world, Mevish. We'll build our own." Epilogue. A new dawn months. Later, the same newspapers that had once mocked him ran a new headline. Ali Khan announces foundation for single mothers and children. Ali had turned the storm into a mission. With Mevish by his side, he poured millions into programs that offered shelter, education, and dignity to struggling mothers, women just like her. At the launch event, he spoke not as a businessman, but as a man transformed. "I once thought success meant towers of glass and steel. But true success is measured in the lives we touch, the love we honor, and the families we protect." The cameras clicked, but this time, the world saw a different Ali Khan. Not just a millionaire, not just a tycoon, but a man who chose truth, love, and family above all. And as he stepped down from the stage, his twins ran into his arms. Mevish stood nearby, her eyes shining with the certainty that at last, after years of struggle, separation, and storms, they were exactly where they were meant to be. The end.